Sick of getting blisters? Stop slipping and just be comfortable with Pure Grip Socks Pro. Great fit, great comfort, lots of grip, and an even better price. Available now at puregripsocks.com.
Forget everything you thought you knew about carbon fiber in a pair of football boots, because these are just different. Ladies and gentlemen, say hello to the brand new Puma Ultra 5 Carbon, a boot that I would argue is one of the most high-tech we've ever seen come out of the Puma brand, featuring a carbon fiber sole plate that is leaps and bounds ahead of anything we've ever seen from an effectiveness standpoint. And I'm specifically using the word effective rather than performance enhancing, because while I think this is a carbon sole plate unlike anything we've ever had in the world of football boots, to suggest that it will improve your performance over other boots that don't have the same plate, that's just not something that I personally believe to be the case. With that said, it's excellent, it's super unique, and the boot as a whole is significantly better than anything we've seen in the speed category from Puma for a couple years now, all for a retail price of $290, which is by no means cheap, but considering how much tech and obviously expensive materials have been utilized here, I actually think that's a pretty decent price tag, especially considering Nike with their carbon fiber sole plate was charging $400 for a pair of Superfly 2s all the way back in 2010. It's not all amazing though, because there are some unexpected performance and feel quirks as it relates to the Ultra 5 Carbon, which is why in today's video we're going to be going over all the details, the good, the bad, and whether or not you should be considering these for your next pair of speed boots, especially if the idea of an ultra responsive carbon fiber sole plate really appeals to you. So if you're interested in learning more, please stick around, and if you're interested in a pair for yourself, you can pick them up below their normal retail price by way of some exclusive SR4U coupon codes via the first link down below. And as always, if you enjoy the unsugar-coated, brutally honest content on the channel, don't forget to drop a like on the video and make sure you're subscribed if you haven't already, so you don't miss out on my reviews of all the latest football boots of 2024. So to start things off, I want to discuss and show you what is easily the biggest negative of the Ultra 5 Carbon, or at the very least something that would be disappointing to somebody that again sees a carbon fiber sole plate and just makes assumptions. If you look at this boot, it looks incredibly light, and with Puma having a history of products like the Evo Speed SL, boots that were just above the 100-gram mark, granted durability wasn't the best, you'd probably expect these with their carbon fiber sole plate to be by far the lightest boot on the market, but that is not actually the case. In a size 9.5 US on a scale, you can see that the Ultra 5 Carbon weighs in at 7.6 ounces, the equivalent of 215 grams. For comparison's sake, here's a pair of Nike Mercurial Vapor 15 Elites in the exact same size. They weigh in at 6.75 ounces, the equivalent of 191 grams. That's nearly 25 grams less. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not suggesting that the Ultra 5 Carbon is a heavy pair of football boots, but compared to all of the current top-end speed boot offerings from all the main brands by at least 15 grams, this is heavier. It even weighs just a smidge more than Puma's own outgoing Ultra Ultimate. I think most people in just about every product category tend to associate carbon fiber with being super light, but that is not the goal of this particular carbon fiber sole plate. Instead, carbon fiber has been used for its properties in regards to overall strength as well as energy return, aka responsiveness. When pressure is applied to the forefoot, it bends and snaps back into place, more aggressively than any other football boot I've ever had on my feet. A statement that's backed up by Puma's own technical claims, where they're saying that this sole plate is 32% more responsive in terms of the energy return that comes out of it when compared to nylon-based sole plates, aka plastic. And when you try to bend the sole plate in your hand, particularly in the forefoot, you can definitely see why they're making those claims, although it does come with a warning sticker new out of the box saying not to bend them excessively because you could crack the sole plate. What does that suggest for the long-term durability of these? That's obviously something that nobody can predict, but I can tell you that it feels incredibly strong, and I don't foresee there being durability issues with the sole plate actually cracking. The thing to note about the extra responsiveness that you're getting from this sole plate is the performance gains are purely down to personal interpretation. And what I mean by that is when you first put these boots on, it's extremely evident that there's something very different underneath your feet compared to other football boots. But after 10 minutes or so, once the novelty of wearing something so different has kind of worn off and you're just playing the game, can I honestly say that these felt particularly responsive compared to other boots? Not necessarily. I would say if anything, the sole plate has a super solid, stiffer overall feel without feeling uncomfortable, because we've had stiff plastic sole plates in the past that just don't feel like they move very naturally with your feet. This, for how stiff it is, does feel like it moves with your foot in all directions in a very comfortable and performance-oriented way. But can I honestly say that these made me feel faster? Personally, no, but your experience may vary depending on, I guess, how much stock you put into a performance feature like that. Because at the end of the day, if Puma is telling you something and you really buy into that, there is something to be said about the placebo effect of you believing that your football boots are going to make you faster, therefore allowing yourself to push yourself a little bit harder and actually be a little bit faster. In other words, Puma's carbon fiber speed system, as they call it, is physically more responsive than any other sole plate, and it feels it when you have the boots on feet. But does that actually translate to performance gains? Not in my personal opinion, but again, your experience may vary. What I also thought was super unique about the feel of these football boots is, unlike most super lightweight modern high-end boots these days, where they almost feel like you're holding air because they're so well balanced all the way through, it's very evident on the Ultra 5 Carbon that all of the weight, or at least the majority of the mass of this football boot, is taken up by the sole plate itself. It is very, very solid. And again, if you want that super structured, rigid base, this is unlike anything else on the market. They've also paired up probably the most extreme sole plate on the market with probably the most extreme stud pattern on the market, at least in the FG category. This is what they call their fast track system. And like we've heard from most brands at this point, it is a data-driven stud pattern that exists for the sake of maximum acceleration, maximum deceleration, quick changes of direction, maximum speed, whatever it is, they've made that claim with this stud pattern. And as you can see, it's very different from anything else currently on the market. Lots of studs in the forefoot, only 3 under the heel, with really just a 2 stud setup and then kind of one little mini support stud at like a weird 45-degree angle at the very back. But you can see all the studs are very aggressive in terms of their 3-sided shape, where you have these long bladed kind of edges that connect it to the sole plate itself. Plenty of bite in pretty much all directions. And in general, this does give you that sensation of running in a pair of sprinter spikes while on grass. And what's also really cool about this stud pattern paired up with the carbon fiber sole plate is if you look at the side, you can actually see the carbon kind of curling up into the shape of the studs, which means it's all kind of incorporated as one unit rather than just a carbon sole plate with a plastic stud plate on top, which is typically how we've seen carbon fiber done in the past. This gives you that very kind of one-piece sensation with everything that's happening on the bottom of your foot. It's super rigid. There's no flex to the studs whatsoever. And from a long-term durability standpoint, I think this is going to be great. Stud pressure is also not an issue in that there is definitely some noticeable rigidity from this carbon fiber sole plate, more so than, again, any other carbon plate I've ever tried on a pair of football boots. And then right around the tip of the toe, you can see it kind of has a hard edge all the way around, but in the forefoot and toe box area, they added this little plastic lip piece just for the sake of kind of reinforcing a high wear zone where the upper connects to the sole plate and hopefully making the boot but actually be more durable. Where from a durability standpoint, again, despite looking like something along the lines of an EvoSpeed SL, this is a very solid feeling pair of football boots, especially at its base. Which brings us to the upper, where there's a lot happening, a lot of different layers, a lot of tech specs being thrown around, but to make a long story short, it feels significantly better than anything we've had on the Puma Ultra series so far. And if I had to compare it to anything else that we've seen in the past, it's kind of reminiscent of the original take of a Vaporposit from the Nike Mercurial series that we had on the Vapor 14 as well as the Superfly 8. But in my opinion, actually better than that, in that this is a little bit more pliable, but also less structured, which of course does have its trade-offs. Also, there is some micro texturing on the surface, predominantly here on the outside of the foot where you do have this Puma form stripe, but in general, it's got a nice kind of grippy texture on the surface where it's not slippery, it's not overly sticky, it just has the perfect amount of grip with a little bit of extra grip in the form of almost like this diamond shape on either side of the heel, which is kind of a weird place to add some extra grip, but it's there nonetheless. This really does give you that raw, pingy, barefoot sensation, and the overall shaping of the boot, as you'll see during the on-feet portion of the video, I think they absolutely nailed. From a fit and comfort standpoint, this is a gigantic improvement over, again, all past Puma Ultra models. The boots also feature a one-piece upper construction where you can see filling in the central portion is just an elasticated knit material utilizing a dual lace hole setup, laces running directly down the middle. You have a standard low cut with an internal plastic heel counter that is super solid. And then you will find what is kind of a unique heel liner in that it is backed by Ortholite foam, fairly minimal in terms of the amount of foam in there, with kind of like a soft microfiber liner on the surface, a little bit of texture from the graphic that you can see they've printed on. And also the liner has these kind of loose pieces that hang over the edge of what would otherwise just be a knitted material. It's kind of a little bit annoying in the sense that when you put the boots on, this kind of folds in on itself and you just have to readjust it once you get your foot inside of the boot. But what's also nice about it is it does kind of hang over the edge on what can sometimes be a little bit of an abrasive edge with this knitted material that I'm sure most of you guys have experienced if you've worn a pair of knitted football boots, which most of you probably have at this point. Then the insole, fully removable. I'll give you guys a quick look at that. It's pretty much just straight foam all the way through, nothing really on the surface other than some micro texturing, and then flip it over and it's just more of the same foam. Not too thick, not too thin, but obviously super lightweight. More or less what you'd expect to find on a pair of top-end speed boots, but also fairly unexceptional. With my only two complaints regarding the upper of this football boot being that it's maybe not as responsive as it perhaps should have been, but at the same time, I do appreciate the little bit of extra pliability you get for the upper, which I think benefits the overall comfort of the football boot. So again, structure and pliability do kind of have to be in balance in order to have something that feels good on your feet. And I think they definitely prioritized feeling good rather than being a little bit more locked down. So it's a trade-off that personally I would take. And then the heel liner, vastly improved over the past Puma Ultra, but I personally could have done with a little bit of extra padding. It just has that firmer feel overall, not uncomfortably so, no issues with heel blisters. I do think the lining material is a little bit on the slick side as well, but with a good pair of grip socks, it's not something that is really an issue whatsoever. Just understand that this is not a pair of football boots that you want to purchase if you're after having some extra padding, because there really isn't any to be had here. On feet, the Ultra 5 Carbon has an incredibly unique feel. I think one of the first things that's immediately noticeable is just how solid this sole plate is. It's noticeably stiffer than anything else that I've ever tried. However, when you start running, it flexes and moves really nicely with your foot, and you do have that sensation of responsiveness. It does feel like a purpose-built sprinter spike that has been modified into a pair of football boots. It's also very noticeable that the forefoot seems to sit a little bit higher than the heel, which really does a good job of kind of putting you on your toes and giving you that sense of just feeling quicker on your feet. And it's also very noticeable that they're not exceptionally lightweight like so many speed boots are. They don't necessarily have that weightless feel. What I'll also say is they do bear similarities to carbon fiber that we have seen from Adidas in X Ghosted, Speed Flow, Speed Portal, as well as, oh, I guess technically not Crazy Fast because that had the plastic plate, but those carbon plate inserts that we had from Adidas a couple years ago, this is similar. It's just to an extreme that is far beyond what Adidas was going with. This is just really, really hardcore. It's the only way that I can put it, and it feels very good underfoot. Does it actually make you faster? No. Will it make you accelerate more quickly? In my opinion, no. But does it feel different from any other football boot I've ever tried? Absolutely. In that regard, the technology is extremely effective. Traction is great underfoot because of how well the sole plate bends with your foot, and the upper I think feels fantastic. I love the touch on the ball. It's soft, it's pliable. My only complaint would again be that heel liner just not having enough padding for my liking, but if you like a thinner overall heel liner, then I don't think you're going to have any issues with these. From a width perspective, I think the shaping is fantastic in that it's slim overall in terms of its overall profile. However, it's not overly narrow in terms of its base shape. So it's one of those shapes that I think will work really well for a wide variety of foot types. Obviously, if you have super wide feet, they're probably not going to be the greatest option, but if you like a snug, tighter fitting football boot, I think you're going to like the way that these feel, and they will work well for most people. And then as far as sizing is concerned, I'm wearing these in my usual size 9.5 US, and they do run just a little bit long. It's not that the toe box comes to a little bit of a point. I would say it's slightly pointy, but not overly so. But because of how low profile the shaping is at the toe, I'm kind of wary to say that you should go down half a size, simply because you might find that there just isn't enough volume in the toe box. I think this is more of a shape thing rather than a sizing thing, although again, your specific foot shape will impact what's technically going to be the best size for you. But I would say in general, if you're wearing your boots super snug right now, especially if it's a pair of Pumas, I would personally stick with the same size. But if you are somebody that's wearing your boots with a little bit of extra space at the moment, I would recommend going down half a size in the Ultra 5 Carbon in order to achieve the best possible fit. So again, it is a matter of interpretation. Just be careful with the sizing because they do run at least a little bit long. So in conclusion, while the Ultra 5 Carbon isn't exactly what I was expecting it to be, what it ended up being is still something that I think is quite the experience. And that's something that I really feel has been lacking, not just from Puma, but from the entire football boot industry. It seems like we've been getting a lot of rinse and repeat boots over the last 5 years or so, and this really feels like a genuinely unique, we've never had before type of experience, which is super exciting. Could and should they be a little bit lighter? Probably. Could they be a little bit more comfortable? Absolutely. But if you've ever wanted a pair of football boots that really feel like they were designed specifically for sprinting, I don't think we've had anything quite as good as these. The Ultra 5 Carbon is what the Superfly 1, 2, and 3 would have been if they were actually good.